All right, let's kick off. So we've got all the panelists here, Anh Quyen and Chị Viang, and we've got around 30 people joining us from across the world. So that's amazing. So hello everyone, my name is Anne. I'm the president of VitPro, and I'm really excited to announce and start the first webinar. So welcome to VitPro's SchoolQuest fundraiser campaign. So today, the first webinar will be about unlocking your podcast talent and will be hosted by Quyen and Viang, who are from Unlock FM. And before I hand it over to the two speakers today, I want to introduce you to our campaign, also provide you with some house rules, and then introduce to you quickly the two speakers today. So about our cause, so the SchoolQuest Challenge, the SchoolQuest fundraiser campaign. So why have we started it? So obviously, as you all know, in many parts of the world, we are under quarantine or lockdown, and it's impacting a lot of people, economies, and this is also the case in Vietnam. As everyone knows, Vietnam has been doing quite well in terms of containing the virus. However, that at the moment, there's still this lockdown has caused a lot of hardship and difficulties for many people. And what we at VitPro and our friends, what we wanted to do is to help the Vietnamese and the ones that are in crisis or in need back in Vietnam. So that's why we've launched the SchoolQuest fundraiser challenge. So a little bit about ourselves, VitPro. So VitPro stands for Vietnamese Professionals, and we are an NGO based in London. Our aim is to help connect Vietnamese professionals in the UK, share knowledge, provide and give guidance to students, and also we want to in some way contribute back to the community. And the cause that we are helping today and the charity we're helping out is called Blue Dragons Children's Foundation. So Blue Dragons Children's Foundation has been set up in 2003 by Michael. And Blue Dragons Children's Foundation is a force of change on the streets of Vietnam. So they help vulnerable kids and also help with victims of human trafficking. During the period of COVID-19, they have launched an emergency appeal asking to help fundraise for the COVID-19 and its impact on those in need. So the funds that we are raising, the aim of it is to provide immediate relief for children and families in crisis. And very importantly, we want to assist over the coming months to rebuild their lives. So to help with the recovery. As you can see on the left-hand side, you can chat with us. Make sure that you do choose all panelists and attendees if you want to speak to everyone or just to all the panelists. And you can see there's a QR code. So if you take your phone and you turn on your camera and you just glance over the QR code, that should take you to the Just Giving page. And now, what I want to ask you to do now is I'm going to launch a poll. And the idea behind it is we want to find out from where in the world you are joining us. So I'm launching the poll now. What happens is you should be able to see a small pop-up on your screen, and you should see a pop-up saying, where are you joining us from? And you can vote. So get voting, my friends. There's around 33 people and 25 have voted. Keep voting, keep voting. All right, I've got some initial results coming in. 5 more people to vote. Try and cast your vote, please. I'll give it another 5 seconds, and then I'm going to end the poll and publish the results so you can see where everyone is joining us from. So 1, 2, get those votes in. 3, 4, 5. I'm going to end the poll. We will be launching these polls across the webinar today, so don't worry. So I'm going to end the poll and I'm going to share the poll so you should be able to see. Okay, so very exciting. We have if you can see here, we have majority of people are joining us from Europe, so 70%. We've got someone joining us from the US, North American Sea, and wow, 30%. So 9 people are joining us from Asia. I guess that's probably majority are from Vietnam. Okay, so what I'm going to, so it's amazing that so many people are joining us from across the world. And I think this has been possible thanks to our partners who've been helping us out. So we want to say special thanks to the Overseas Vietnamese Group, the Vietnam Finance Society, and the Vietnamese Family Partnership. So they've been partnering with us and helping us to spread the word across the community. They have a good reach, a global reach. And so thank you very much to them. We also, you can see our nice designs. We haven't designed it. It's actually thanks to the help of Son Phan and Cha Zhang from Gideon. So thank you very much, guys. And before we go into the webinar, I'd like to explain some house rules, really simple house rules. So as you can see from, if you're joining us from Zoom, you will only be able to see the host, which is myself, and Anh Hiếu, who doesn't have his camera on. Then you will be able to see Anh and Quyen. So those are the only 4 screens you'll be able to see. And if you have any questions to the speakers, please make sure that you submit it in the Q&A section. In the Q&A section and not in the chat section, please. So any question, please submit in the Q&A section. And if you have comments, any comments, then please provide that in the chat. So all the questions that you provide, when we get to the Q&A session, what will happen is that the highest upvoted question will be asked. So you can see here that if you open the Q&A chat, you can actually upvote somebody's question if they've already asked it. And in the Q&A chat, you can either post the question as yourself, or you can choose to be an anonymous attendee. If you're choosing yourself as an anonymous attendee, then I will ask that question on your behalf. So, and if you are asking that question, so what will happen is that I will allow you to talk, which means that you will also appear on the Zoom view, and you can then basically converse with the speakers. And after you've asked your question, I will be basically taking you back as an attendee. Okay, cool. So let's start the webinar. So in terms of our webinars, we are organizing webinars across May and June. And today I'm excited to bring to you Anh Quyen and Vi Anh, who will be talking about how to create your podcast. And across our webinars, we've organized it into 3 teams. So the first one is lifestyle and well-being. The second one is personal development. And the third one is creativity. And today, the creating your podcast will fall under the theme of creativity. And I would like to launch another poll. And I'd like to find out how knowledgeable you are with running a podcast. So you should be able to, again, see the poll pop up, and you should be able to cast your vote. Wow, this is really cool. So I can see a lot of results saying that some of you know how to run a podcast. Interesting. So for those that are joining us just now, I've just launched a poll. So you should see a pop-up and you can vote. Okay, I'll give it 5 more seconds and then I'm going to end the poll and share the result. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Share results. Okay, so really cool. So how knowledgeable are you about running a podcast? Wow, 50% are saying no knowledge and 50% are saying a little bit. So they do, Vi Anh and Quyen, they do know a little bit. Will be interesting.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so let me introduce to you Vi Anh and Quyen. So Quyen and Vi Anh are both avid podcast listeners, and they've turned actually from listeners to producers because both of them are very passionate about meeting people and learning about their stories. And for a very long time, they've been trying to find out these stories from, young Vietnamese people, and trying to understand how they are navigating their lives and careers. But they weren't able to find one. So what did they do? In a very Vietnamese entrepreneurial spirit, they decided to start their own. So I will stop and shut up, and I'll hand over to Viang and Quyen. So Quyen and Viang, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and you take the stage.
Cool.
Thanks, Anne.
Just give me a sec while I present the screen. Oh. Can folks see it?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Okay, so morning everyone from Europe, and good afternoon folks in Vietnam or in Asia. And I guess just general hello to people who may be watching the recording afterward. So I think as Anne introduced, my name is Quyen, or people call me Vince in the UK. And I'm one of the co-hosts of Unlock FM. Super happy to be here. I think we're both very thankful for the opportunity to be able to present to you today about our young and amateurish journey on creating a podcast. And very thankful for the team at VietPro who've kind of led the way to organize this, and also their awesome partners. I think as Anne pointed out at the beginning, Overseas Vietnamese, Viet Family Partnerships, and Vietnam Finance Society. And also all the great designers as well. So yeah, just happy that everyone's coming together to support the Blue Dragon Children Foundation in this and their amazing cause. So I think before we start though, very big disclaimer. This is the first time I think both Vieng and I have delivered this sort of digital workshops or webinar. Obviously, we presented on virtually before, but not in this sort of format. So, and also we're not professional podcasters, right? So we've only been doing this for roughly 6 months. So still very, very new. So please bear with us. And also the next thing is it might seem that we're going to be covering a lot of content today because there are a lot of steps and process involved in creating a podcast. So it's actually awesome that maybe nearly half of the attendees already know how to start a podcast. So make our jobs a bit easier. Yeah. So if there's anything that you feel like we've brushed through, you want to find out a little bit more, then please leave the questions in the Q&A panel. Upvote some of them, or in general, just take note or watch the recording later for reference if you need to kind of remind yourself something. Because we're covering a lot of steps, so it might seem overwhelming, but we're sure that if we can do it, you can absolutely do it even better than us with the right level of passion and effort. So yeah, I think that's just a quick intro. I think now I'm going to go into the agenda. Just give me a sec. Yeah, so pretty straightforward agenda. We're going to start by introducing who we are, and then we're going to go into right into and a little bit about why we start Unlock FM, and I guess why should you be thinking about starting your own podcast. And then we're going to take you through some of the simple stuff as we pointed out, so pre-launching, so everything from ideations to buying your equipment, setting up your kind of recording stations and everything, to launching, designing your logo and banner, going to forums and communities, and then after launch, how can you grow your audience and think about monetization if that's something you want to do. And at the end, we're going to have a quick Kahoot quiz, if folks are familiar with it, and there'll be actual prize. I'm not kidding, there's actual money on the table, so please pay attention. We're going to test whether you've been listening towards the end. And then we're going to do a quick feedback polls. I think the team will be sending up a very thorough survey at the end anyway. But we're just going to do something quite fun to just capture your feedback in real time, and then leave around 10-15 minutes for Q&A, if that's all right, folks. So yeah, I think just going to jump right straight into it. Maybe Viang, you want to start first by introducing yourself?
Okay, sure. Hi, everyone. This is Viang. Good evening from Sydney, Australia. Today, I will be joining my friend and my co-host, Quyen, on this webinar to talk about something that we are both very passionate about, which is creating a podcast. So thank you so much for taking the time. I know it's Sunday. You may have a lot of plans. The sun is out. And thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us. And by the end, we hope that you will get motivated and equipped to start your own podcast the next day. But before we start, let me just quickly introduce myself. My name is Vieng, and a lot of people just call me Anne. I'm a junior project manager for Macquarie Group. I've lived in Sydney for a year and a half now. Before Australia, I was a policy analyst at the Central Bank of Vietnam for 2 years. You can see down here, there are a couple of logos that represent all the organizations that I used to work for. I actually just copy what Quyen did. I had no idea where I put it. But one of the logos that you may notice is the Voice of Vietnam, our national broadcasting service, or Đài Tiếng Nói Việt Nam in Vietnamese. So around 10 years ago, I got the chance to do some voiceover and host a couple of radio shows for them. And after 10 years, I'm doing something pretty much similar, which is podcasting. And I can't believe a lot of skills that I picked up during those years still stay with me until now and help me a lot when we develop Unlock FM. And I can't wait to share with you very shortly.
Cool, thanks, Vieng. And I guess about myself, outside of being a host for Unlock FM, I do have a day job, so I do make some money. So at the moment, I work for Google in the cloud sales team there, in a technical sales role. And then before that, I spent a few years doing technology consulting with Deloitte, which was super interesting. And during that time as well, actually, I used to be the president of VietPro, who's the kind of the leading organization for this campaign. But I've stepped down after 4 years, and just super excited and proud of the amazing team that running this campaign, and also many other exciting projects that we have. So. And then before that, I spent, I studied at the LSE in the UK, and also did a master in Imperial College. I guess I don't really have any background in audio or radio or any sorts of storytelling, but I've been listening to podcasts in 2013. And I think, as Anne mentioned at the beginning, I've been a great listener of podcasts, but then I've been looking for some content in Vietnam or in Vietnamese, and focusing on Vietnamese personality. And I think both Vieng and I couldn't find it, so we just decided to do it ourselves. Just a quick personal intro into the real meat of the content. I think I can start quickly by talking about why podcasts. I think if folks are joining today, I think you all to some extent, we're gonna do a actually I think, Anne, we have a quick poll on this, right? Can we tune it up really quickly?
Yep. So I'm about to launch a poll. You should see it now.
Yeah. So this is just a quick one about, just to get an idea of if people actually listen to podcasts at all, and see, who we'll be talking to today. If we can just spend a few seconds to vote.
Okay. Seven more submissions.
Cool.
Okay, 5 more submissions. I'll give it 5 seconds and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right.
Maybe people are making breakfast or something.
So share results. You should see on. You should see the results now.
Ah, okay, super interesting. So I think most people spend from 2 to 4 hours, or I mean from 0 to 4 hours, and some people actually spend more than 4 hours a week. That's awesome. Okay. Just a quick, pause to see what's everyone up to in terms of their podcast habit. But I think what we want to say is, I think if you're here, then you're excited about podcasts. And I think we've shared a few quick stats in our intros, which is, there's a recent survey around how many people in the US have actually listened to a podcast. We don't really have, a statistic for the world population, but I think it's a good proxy. So 55% of the US population have listened to a podcast last year, and actually 24% listen to a podcast weekly. So we know that now it's becoming a fast growing media format. I think it's one of the most exciting one in the last few decades. There are now more than 1 million podcasts on Apple's podcast and Spotify, and they're not the same actually, interestingly. But then okay. That's a quick question that I just saw in the chat. Why is it called podcast? I think I know the answer. I'll try, but don't quote me on it. I think it was because it came from the iPod. So the way it worked was people want to kind of, when the iPod was popularized, I think folks obviously listen to music, so on their MP3, but then some people found that they want to listen to some sort of kind of content, radio content, offline on demand. So they decide to, an Apple decided to call it podcast. Then the term itself actually came from Apple or iTunes back then, actually. And they are still one of the most popular platform nowadays for podcasts. But actually, it's still very nascent in Southeast Asia, which is, I think, one of the reasons why we decided to create our podcast in Vietnamese. There are not very many well-known podcasts in the Vietnamese market. There's only a very small creator community. The charts are often dominated by random playlists like lo-fi, chill hop, and audiobooks. And we haven't seen many well-produced podcasts or no actually big-name podcast producer or media company. So in essence, it's still super nascent. It's big in the world. It's big in the Western culture, but it's not as much as big in Southeast Asia and Vietnam specifically. So yeah, it's super exciting to do this actually. But I think that's more of a macro stats. I think I'll hand it over to Vian to go through the more personal reason why we actually decided to create Unlock FM.
Yeah, thank you. So I would just maybe touch on this, from a more personal perspective. So last year, when I moved to Sydney for work, I rent an apartment just within walking distance from my office to explore the city life. And every day in the morning and after work, I listened to podcasts when I was walking home, and I just loved it. Because listening to podcasts is a very, I guess, intimate experience. It makes you feel like someone's voice is like walking in your head, like their stories, like everything is in your head, and it feels like they are just right there next to you. And because there's no image, no illustration, nothing else other than a voice, you kind of like have to pay attention to what that voice is talking about. And this is a very special connection that we rarely have, even with someone who's just like sitting, across the table with us. And a podcast is not intimidating like videos. You don't have to worry about your appearance. You could literally like wear PJ and talk to someone from the other side of the world, or you could just reach out to anyone, no matter where they are. I think this is very important for me personally, because when I moved to Sydney, I didn't have a lot of friends. I was a little bit caught up in work. I didn't have time to make new friends. And when I do have time to socialize, I just feel like, I don't know about you, but for me, attending, socials and networking events sometimes don't really allow me to have any meaningful conversation with someone I just met. But through podcasts, I was able to not only connect with like-minded individuals, people that I'm genuinely interested in, but also I could invite other people, the audience, to join our conversation. And in that way, I can learn from many different perspectives. I think we've shared most of this in our pilot episode of Unlock FM. So if you're keen to hear more, you could just head to that episode. But essentially what I'm trying to say is meeting people, learning about their stories, and crafting our own storytelling skill is something that both Quyen and I love to do. It's so important to our personal and career development, no matter which part that we decide to take on now and in the future. Okay.
Cool. So I think we're going to move on to how are you going to start a podcast from the very early stage, right, Vian?
Yeah. So in this next slide. So in this part, I'm just going to walk you through, just a few steps that you may consider when you start developing your idea. If you're thinking, okay, this sounds interesting, I want to start doing something with it, but I'm not sure what it should be about. I have no idea which topic that I should just choose. Then don't worry, because you're not alone. Everyone will tell you that, okay, just start with something that you're passionate about. But what if you don't really know what you're passionate about? And that's okay. because in this section, we will walk you through a few steps that we took to develop our podcast idea. It's not easy to come across a brilliant idea in the blink of an eye, but we could take a few steps to get there. What you could do, as you can see from the slide, what you could do is just to get out 2 pieces of paper, label the first one passions, and underneath it, just write a list of things that you like. And if you are struggling to find what you really, really like, just ask yourself a few questions. What do you enjoy doing in your spare time? What could you talk about for hours? And if you had, all the money in the world, you don't have to worry about financials, what would you do with your time? So basically just think about anything that drives you, even if it seems crazy. At first, just write it down. And for me, I think I'm genuinely interested in other people and listening to their stories. And the older I get, the more I learn that people, even the most quiet people, they do have things they want to share and want to be heard. But they only share their stories, their favorite parts, to those who show interest in, knowing them. And I find this process of building trust between 2 people, sometimes 2 strangers, through conversations, long or short form, very challenging, but also very human and captivating at the same time. And this is something that I really enjoy doing all the time. I realize journalism and storytelling is my passion. Sometimes I just intentionally push it away, but somehow it just keeps coming back. So if I can't hide away, let's do something about it. Right, so once you've done with that, move to the second paper. Move to the second paper.
Sorry. Spoiler, sorry.
That's okay. So you move to the second paper and you label it expertise at the top. And in this section, just write out things that you are good at. Doesn't have to be expertise in, the career sense, just anything that you do well. I know that it's easy to underestimate how much you know and how well you do something when that something just comes so easily to you. If you're struggling to come up with things you do well, just think about what other people talk about you and what people often tell you that you're good at. For us, I think one feedback that Quyen and I often hear from our friends and people that we work with is that we are quite friendly and likable. We could get along pretty easily with different groups of people. And if that's something that we are identified with, let's come up with something that involves, engaging people, something that allows us to encourage them to share their stories in a couple of hours that they share with us in a podcast. And hopefully their stories will help someone out there navigate their way forward, right? So now that you know your passion and you know your expertise, let's just find somewhere where these 2 intersect. That's where your idea lies. In our case, Unlock FM is probably the perfect match of our passion for talking to people, interviewing people, and our experience working in jobs that probably expose us to so many and so different personalities, I guess.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So actually, maybe this is a good point to pause a little bit. And I think we also have another pause, if Anne can bring it up. I think obviously if you're here today, then you kind of you're ready to maybe start your own podcast. So we're just curious, what sort of topics or areas that you are passionate about that you would like to launch a podcast in, if that's something you plan to do. So please take a few seconds to fill in the poll. Just come up. I mean, obviously, this is not a comprehensive list of topics, but I think we actually took this from the Apple Podcast main categories. Maybe I don't know if that's more people to fill in, Anne, but maybe just,
Yes.
yeah, we can.
So 30 out of 44 have filled in. Let's give it
Okay.
a couple of seconds. So if I've launched a poll. So for those that are just recently joined, if you take a step back from the Zoom, you should be able to see a pop-up on your screen where you can submit your answers. So 5 seconds, and then I'll end the poll. So okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to end the poll. There will be more polls coming, so this is not the last time. Don't worry. And Paul, there's a funny comment coming from Mike Taylor. So where does the sport fall into this list? Blame Apple.
I think it could be what is it? Health and lifestyle. Oh wow.
Ooh,
okay, super interesting.
yeah.
Oh, okay. So not a lot of people actually like to talk about politics. So that's good. Lots of ideas around career development and business and startup. Okay, life. Yeah, that's really cool. That's a very diverse group of topics, and I guess listeners. Cool. Okay. Oh wow, whatever that sound is. Cool. I think any other point here, Viang? Or we can move to the next.
Yeah, you can move to the next one.
Cool. Okay. I think this is, I guess, what most people might think of as a boring part, but I personally find it exciting. I'm a bit of a geek, as you can see. Yeah, but well, as you can tell from my appearance, but but I think this is quite key in creating a podcast because we are very, I mean, we both been listening to podcasts for a long time. We are very particular about what we want to hear. There are many podcasts out there. So we like to think that sound quality is one of the most differentiated factor you can bring into a podcast. So, and I think we're going to take you through these three things that can make or break your sound. And you know what you can deliver with your narrative. So I guess what we're trying to say here is in the previous bit you think about your content, about your narrative, about your ideas, your objectives, but even if your content is solid, but if your delivery and your sound is not captivating, people lose attention. So this is how you can start to look into investing in some of these equipments and technologies. So the first thing, which is we consider to be the most important and actually the most expensive out of all of these things, is actually your microphone. So obviously you can see that I'm using one microphone now, and there's kind of two main categories when you think about microphones or microphone for podcasts in general. The one is called dynamic. So dynamic microphones are, I think, as you can read from the slide, they are versatile, they are practical, they tend to be used in live performance because they can reduce background noise. They are fairly reliable. They can stand the humidity. If you're in Vietnam, for example, there's a lot of microphone that can't work in Vietnam because it's just too humid. And if you leave your microphone in the cupboard, it's actually broke. So dynamic microphones are like that. So my microphone here, you can see the example there is called Rode Procaster. It's an example of a dynamic microphones. And then there's the other type, which is called a condenser microphone. They are created for the control studio environment. They have very clear, detailed sounds. So typically, if you're listening to an artist recording their vocals, it's usually by a condenser microphone. They are but because of that, it has very high sensitivity. It tends to pick up noise in the room. So if you don't have a control environment, it can pick up things like scratching on your tables, people walking in and out, vacuum cleaner, I don't know, whatever you have around yourself. So because of that, we tend to recommend that you go with a dynamic microphone if you are starting out, just because it's much more versatile. And I think most of us don't really have a control studio environment, right? So I'm sitting in my living room at the moment. I think Viang is sitting in her bedroom there. So I think for many of us, a dynamic microphone is a great way to start. But then obviously once you have that sort of investment into it, you start to think about doing this full time or whatever, then you build your own studio, then you can think about using a condenser microphone, which gives you a bit of a nicer, warmer voice and tone. But then there's the other factor that you have to consider, which is something called an XLR connections or USB. So these are a bit like if you think about USB-C or USB-A, right? So microphones were created with an XLR connections. I mean, I don't know if you can see my mouse moving on the screen here, but that's the connection. It's a very big kind of 3-pin cable. They were used to for you know, when you record guitars or whatever. So because of that, I mean, it produced a really nice quality, but the problem is you need an interface which kind of convert the XLR signal into USB signal that can come into your laptop. So because of that, I mean, I can't show you here, but you know, in addition to this microphone, I also have to have an interface. So that's the another investment you have to take. But the benefit of that is you can control your voice input better. You can do a lot of stuff with the interface. It basically gives you more control and more visibility into what you're doing. But again, I think for beginners or for people who are starting out, please stick with I mean, not please, but I mean, try to stick with a USB interface. I think Vietnamese is using a microphone which has a USB interface, which makes it much easier to connect to your laptops and whatever. And yes, I think another pause here for Paul. I think if Anne can bring that up, I think it just get a sense from people if folks have researched this, and you know, how much do you actually think a good beginner microphone would cost? If you can just start filling in, be interested to hear.
So I just launched a poll again. You should see the pop-up.
Yeah. I think this surprised us a little bit when we started, right, Vi?
Yeah.
So we've got 31 out of 44 who responded. So we'll wait for a bit.
Yep, American dollars.
Mm.
All right, 5 seconds. I'll end it.
Nice.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Wow, it's good. Okay, I think most people got it correct. I think. Yeah, so I think the in the range of $80 to $150 is a good starting point. I think just to give folks, I guess, a real estimate. I think this microphone cost me £140, so that's actually a bit, you know, more than $150, and not including a lot of these accessories. I think Viang, yours cost was it around 90?
Yeah,
Australian
$90. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, but again, I mean, it doesn't mean that you have to invest a lot of money into it. I think, I mean, personally, I'm a bit of a, I don't know, I like to have some cost into things that I do. So if I spend something upfront, I feel like I'm personally more invested into it. For example, recently my fiance asked me to do yoga, but I can't just I can't do yoga normally. I have to buy like a very fancy, expensive yoga mat to be able to do it. It's just me, right? So don't follow what I do. But I think this is just to give everyone a quick price range on how much you should think about investing in your microphone. And I think $80 to $150 is a good starting point. I mean, Viang, anything to add here before I move to the other section? Cool. Okay. So the second most important factor is what we call a digital audio workstations. And many of you might be familiar with this if you have ever done any sorts of video or audio engineering. So some of the most popular DAW is Audacity, Adobe Auditions, Logic Pro, which just comes with Apple, and you might have heard of Anchor as well, a company that Spotify acquired recently, and something that's actually very exciting, but we don't get to talk about today, which is Descript. It's a very innovative solution. It basically converts all of your audios. Typically, if you speak in English, they do transcription for English. They turn your audios into Word document, and you can actually edit the words to edit the audio. I don't know if you get the idea of that solution from what I'm saying, but it's super exciting because I think here's a screenshot of what like a typical episode of ours would be. So you can see on the screen there, it's a mix of, for example, this is the track for Viang, that's mine, that's in the third row, that's the track for one of our the other co-hosts, and then the final track is for music, for example. It looks intimidating, but I assure you it's not, because I mean none of us are professional here. We only started, I think, trying it out and working on it. Obviously when we started the podcast, and I think it takes maybe 2-3 weeks before we get comfortable with it. And yeah, so I mean, so don't worry about it. There's a lot of good tutorials and programs on that we can share. There's a lot on YouTube, but the best way to learn is by doing, right? So I think at the beginning you could spend up to 5 hours to edit an hour worth of content. I think that's how we started. Not as proficient as others, but I think now we're getting better, right? I think now it takes around maybe 2 hours for us to edit an hour worth of content. Yeah, exactly. Right. So every time it's faster, it's a bit easier. We have some template that we can do now. But I think the other thing to point out here is you can spend as much time in this as you want, right? Because I think, as we mentioned personally, Vieng and I have a very keen ear for quality. We are very particular listener. So we actually like to spend a lot of time in this. I think especially Vieng. I think Vieng, obviously from your time doing radio broadcasting, I think you basically cut out all the and in all of our podcasts. At the beginning, I was agitated that we have to do that, but now I understand. I mean, so, but yeah, again, it's all about how much time we want to put into this. And in terms of pricing, I think many of you would have used the Adobe suite, so Adobe Creative Cloud. Auditions come with it. You can buy it standalone, but typically it's around £20 or $20 per month. It's cheaper for students and teachers, I think. But actually, the other program that I mentioned, so Audacity, in the previous slide, is equally good. Maybe not as good, but it's open source and it's free. So again, if you want to start quickly, pick up Audacity, and that's it. There's Anchor as well, which really helped you to kind of start quickly, because everything is kind of built in. It's also a podcast host, which we will come into. Excuse me. But yeah, again, just to reiterate, we use Adobe Auditions for our workflow. And again, something that we're not going to be able to cover today, but collaboration is also key. If you have to co-host, you have to find a uniform solution so you can actually share file with each other. But yeah, that's something that that's worth mentioning. Anything to add here, Vieng? No?
No, yeah.
Cool. So the last thing is, I think, because we purposely, because obviously we are two hosts, one in London, one in Sydney. So a lot of our podcasts, and also because our podcasts are interview-based, we do remote recording or remote interviews. And it's actually, again, another key factor in producing nice quality audio, right? Because you can use Zoom or Meet as a typical solution. But the issue with Zoom or Meet is that they produce one track, one output. So for example, if you go back to this slide, you cannot have, with Zoom or Meet, you can't have our track as individual and separate like this. So you have to use a dedicated remote recording platform. So in our case, we use something like TriCast. Again, it's very hard to explain what it is, but I mean, maybe here's a quick screenshot. But the idea is everyone would dial in. It looks like Zoom, but the key here is every individual participant have their own tracks. So afterward, you can actually add all of that into your digital audio workstations and be able to kind of fine tune it as you see fit. But the other thing that it avoids is it avoids you losing the files as well. There's a lot of time that connection is an issue with these things. But these dedicated platforms have ways to work around that. But yeah, and again, the pricing for this is around $10 per month, I think, for the platform that we're using, and it could be a bit more expensive if you, and they're more expensive options. But yeah, I think that was just a quick breeze through, some of the more technical bits, the boring bits. And again, I think
It's not.
And I think it's just to quickly summarize. I think in terms of if you're really considering starting a podcast, then the cost for each of these are around, say $100 for your microphones, roughly $20 per month, or free if you're considering your editing applications. and then another $10 per month for your remote recording platform if you want one. I think again between the two of us, we're sharing the cost, right, Vieng? So it's not crazy. Obviously, we're not making money out of our podcast yet. We'll get into that in a bit, but it's not too costly at the moment. We think. Yeah, I think I'll stop there, and now we can move on to the interesting bit, which is how do you actually plan out your content and write a script, for example. So over to you.
Cool, thanks. Next one. Right. So planning is probably now is an essential part of many creative processes, and producing a podcast is just no exception. As you may have realized already, podcasting combines elements of radio, journalism, and audio production, and creating them can be a little bit of an arduous process. But if you take a considered approach with good planning, each of these elements will fall into place much easier. Of course, every podcast is very different, but they all share some fundamental aspects in common. And in this section, let's take a look at the ins and outs of planning out a podcast episode. The first step is creating an outline for your episode. So your outline doesn't have to be like a minute by minute plan. It just means you do need to have a rough plan of what you're going to do. What's first, what's next, how did you get from one thing to the next, and if multiple people are involved, who's going to do what. As you can see here, there are a few points that you could consider when you start outlining your episode. What your episode is going to be about, the overarching theme, is there any research required, who are you going to interview, what assets are you going to need, all the editing tools, music, sound effects, and so on, up to you. With Unlock FM, we know that the first guest is really, really important, because their stories will help us somehow like deliver our message to our audience. And we know that our message is bold. Okay, this podcast is about career development, but it's not just about, the corporate world that you often see. The world is changing, and there are a lot of options out there for you for the future. And no matter which path that you follow, as long as you really focus and put your heart into it, you will eventually get it, and people will respect you because of your craft. So with that message in mind, we kind of like, okay, quickly brainstorm. The first episode must be about something that people rarely touch on, but shouldn't be something like too controversial, like it's just nonsensical to stir things up just to impress. Our message is bold, so our first guest must be someone who's bold, but like accessible, someone that the audience could relate to and feel like, oh, they're just like one of us. But very slowly you will see that person made a transition into something that is super like very different from where they began. I think stories like this will help you keep the audience engaged and curious at the same time. And we immediately think about Julie, our friend, who studied political science at uni and came from a background that everyone would expect her to climb up the corporate ladder and become a woman leader in that space, but she didn't. She just refused to go down that track and decided to do something that she thinks makes her happy and excited every day, which is opening a nightclub. Okay, sorry, just want to be cautious of time. I'm not going to go into details, but if you're keen to hear more about the story behind, you could go to episode 1 and 2 of Unlock FM to hear more. Just to that point, even though Julie is our friend and we know her for a while, to get her to the show, we have to make sure that we understand what she's doing, so we could be on the same page with her. That's when research comes into play, or I would say Google comes into play. Yeah, research is extremely important to have, drive home your key points and make it easier to discuss a topic and engage your your audience. This process may involve, just simply like reading relevant academic articles, news, interview, footage, or just like Google anything that you can find. For our first episode, although Julie is my friend, I still look her up on the internet to see if there's anything else about her that I might have missed. I go to her public profile, social media, LinkedIn profile to have an idea what she's doing, and even reach out to a few, mutual connections to ask about her. Well, trying to get to know, your guests, but not too much, because you don't want to be a stalker, right? And you don't want them to feel like, they are being stalked or something like that. And we also do some industry research as well. During the interview, we want to make sure that we have something to talk about and show our guests so that we are very much interested in knowing them. I am compared to Quyen, I'm a very lazy person. I don't often enjoy reading that much in my spare time. I just want to watch something like easy to digest. But I quite enjoy this process, this research process, because I got to learn about a lot of things that I wouldn't have had enough, motivation to look into if I didn't work on this podcast. So that's
True.
pretty good for, Next one, for interviewing, again, preparation is key. You should have a few key points and questions that you want to cover, but try not to be too specific, because a natural flow of conversation is very important. And that means keeping your questions open and loose. A couple of things that you may probably keep in mind while interviewing. First, make sure that you've done your research, you do your homework, then you should maybe prepare and write down your questions beforehand, and make your questions interesting as well. No one, wants to answer very boring questions or questions that they are asked a lot of times. So try to be interesting. Give your guests some heads up of what you will be talking about before the interview. I think this is important because it allows our guests to have some time to organize their thoughts, or like to reflect and select, their favorite stories to tell. And also make sure that your interview is gonna be conducted in a quiet place. Quyen can share a little bit of the experience that we just had last month, when we had a very challenging interview, very interesting but challenging afterwards, when we had to edit out a lot of noises from our interview with Anh Quyen. Yeah, and also, okay, just sorry, go ahead.
No, I think it was just, I think to the spirit of a startup. So for folks who haven't listened to that episode, so Quang Thai, he's the founder of Quyen, a Vietnamese watch brand. It's actually gorgeous. I mean, I don't know, Viang, if you have it on your wrist, but you can show people.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh,
yeah.
sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. But the
it's
point
okay
is,
from Quyen and Tiên. Yeah, thank you.
But yeah, he was in his office while recording the episode, and then his employees were actually outside packaging the watch that's to be shipped. So there's a lot of scratching and rapping noise outside. So I think and to this point, there's a few questions around on the Q&A about how we ensure sound quality coming from our guests. So to do this, I mean, it's not something that we can particularly control really well, but we do have a very comprehensive guide that we tend to send to our guests before, like a couple of weeks before we actually do the recording. In there, it's very much like an information pack around how, who we are, what sort of content and guests have we brought on into the podcast, and then very specific tips. I think as Viang already pointed out a few here on the slide. So for example, sit in a quiet place, either in your living rooms, your bedrooms, or just at home. Don't go into the office, or sit in cafe shops. That's not amazing. But the hardest bit is to have our guests use a dedicated headset. It's not easy. I think many of our guests, obviously, they don't have the equipment that we do. If folks are actually for famous podcasts, they actually ship their microphone to the guests. I mean, we would love to be able to do that at some point if we have enough money, or if we ever have our guests in one place I think it's very hard to ship it to Vietnam and then next day to Australia and then back to the UK or whatever, right? But I think we always recommend our guests to have a dedicated headset, wire headset, not even wireless, wire headset, anything that they've used for their conference call, whatever. And that's the best we get, really. Apart from that, we do tend to have a lot of techniques. I think, as we mentioned, having a digital audio workstation like Auditions, they have a lot of built-in preset for you to kind of fine-tune your guest's voice quality if it's not up to par. So like it reduces a lot of background noise, a lot of hum in the podcast, in the audio. But yeah. Anyway, it's not something we can particularly control, but we've kind of managed our way around it, I guess.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay. Cool. Next one. All right. Script. I think there are quite very much a lot of like divergent opinions on whether or not we should have a script for our podcast. I don't know about you, but for us, having a script is almost like a must. As you know, like we have a pretty demanding jobs outside the podcast world. We don't have a lot of time, and our guests don't either. So within the 2 and 3 hours, probably the only time that we could catch our guests and get to have a rather deep conversation with them, we have to be structured, just to make sure that no time is wasted, or we just want to make sure we don't miss out anything. Having a script also shows our guests that we do our homework and we value the precious time that they spare just for us. Some of the key elements of a script that you could see right here in the slide: your introduction, guest introduction, blah blah blah. Actually, there are a lot of script templates out there that you could look up. I'm not going to go into details, but like just an idea that you need the structure of your interview. You know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think something worth adding here is again, Viang is also a great writer, if folks don't know. So her scripts are typically amazing, and I think to give people a sense of how long our script could be, I think it's usually in the range of 2,000 to 3,000 words. Mainly because we do write out our intro in sentence, right? We don't use bullet points typically, but that's give people a sense of how long we usually craft our script. And I think the other point to point out here is we send this to our guests in advance, and many of them actually write down their own answers as a basis during the interview. Many of them choose not to because they want the they're good at what they do and what they talk about, so they don't need to. But I think the other point to point out here is, even though we have script, I think many times, I think probably 70% of our content are not based on the script, right? Many times it's all questions that we kind of ask on during the recording. Yeah,
I think it's more like it's just like the idea is giving our guests
structure,
an idea of like what's going on, like what are you going to talk about, what are you going to ask me, because we didn't get a chance to talk to one another in person. So I think it's really important. And as you at Quyen's already said, like most of the time we didn't really like speak word by word everything that we wrote down in the script, but it's really important. Yeah,
it's actually sometimes the random questions and spontaneous question is the fun one. And the random story from our guests. Cool. I think just in the interest of time, we might speed through the other section really quickly, because it's actually pretty straightforward. I think now let's assume that you have a few episodes in the backlog. You've recorded it, you've talked to your guests, you've edited. And this is actually a good point, because there are various debate around how many episodes should you release at the beginning of your podcast. I think our recommendation is a minimum of 3, typically 1 for your trailer and 2 solid episodes, because you don't want to kind of release an episode and then have your new audience kind of wait another couple of weeks before the other one come out. So we actually in our case, we did exactly that. So we released an episode 0, which is our trailer. It talks about why we started Unlock FM, and 2 episodes based on our first guest, Julie, as Viang pointed out. But in any case, so say if you have these 3 episodes, what else do you have to do? That's not the end of it, obviously. You have to think about your design, because I think we think obviously podcast is very much an audio product, but design is also a very core part of your identity. It can reflect whether you are a casual chill out podcast or a super serious one, business focused one. So, and I think many people actually get drawn to podcasts because of the logo or the podcast cover. I know I do. Even someone recommend me a podcast. If I look at the logo, it looks shit, then I was sorry. Excuse my French. I wouldn't listen to it. Again, it talks about my đồng bongness, if people knows the word. I only like things that's pretty. But in any case, it's not just your logo or your banner. It's actually your episode art, featuring your guests. Every episode, we tend to change our design a little bit. It's also a lot of your posts on social media. It has to be consistent with your brand. I think in overall, you have to kind of create this kind of brand identity if you can. So you can either go to a freelance platform such as 99 Design or Fiverr. Many people know it, to have them design your logo or your brand identity package. Or I think you can use Canva. Not Canva, but like any design platform. But I think case in point here, because we create all of our logos and banners and social media posts on canva.com. And this presentation was created by Canva as well, right? So, I mean, we're not saying the prettiest template, but I think it's much better than PowerPoint or Google Slides or whatever. So, but then the best option is, go to have a dedicated designer. If you have friends or you have enough budget to do it. And obviously the amazing designers that create the Skill Quest campaign, Sun Fan and Cha Zhang at Gideon, they are super amazing. If you manage to get any of them involved in your project, that'd be the best thing. But if you don't, then yeah, go stick with a freelance platform or canva.com if that's something you want to do. So moving on, I think, so say assuming you now have your design, you have your episode ready to go, how do you actually distribute it to your listeners? So this is where we come to another concept that's a bit specific to podcasts, which is called hosting or distributions. So think of your podcast hosts as a bit like a landing page, right? They're like your website. But apart from just being your website, where you used to have things like WordPress or Squarespace or whatever, these podcast hosts audio help you set up and manage some of the most important component of your podcast, which is the RSS feed, the thing on the far left there. So if you follow blogs in the old days, you should be familiar with RSS, but if not, then it's basically a central links, which includes all of the important data related to your podcast episode. It is constantly updated every time you have a new episode, or if you update a title or your notes or whatever. And it's basically used by all the apps and all the directories to pull down and serve your episode on their platform, right? So the feed is super important, and usually you have to get a podcast host to do that for you. You can do it yourself if you want to, but again, it's not easy. And then the thing in the middle there, the directories are a bit like the web for podcasts. But the issue with podcasting is there's no central directory like the World Wide Web as we have it, because Apple Podcast, I think as we mentioned at the beginning, Apple Podcasts used to be the first directory and the only directory. And it's still the most popular one, but they're actually now Spotify, Stitcher, who are kind of running their own directory as well. It means that you actually have to go to them and register your podcast and your feed to be able to be on their platform. But the funny thing is many of these directories are also apps that you can listen to your podcast. But yeah, it's just the way it works. Essentially, the podcast hosts help facilitate your feeds and then push them to these directory, if that makes sense. And again, here, I think we have a poll, but maybe in interest of time, we can skip it. And the last point here I want to touch on around hosting is analytics, because it's one way to serve your podcast and your website or whatever, but the analytics is as important as as anything else when it comes to growing your audience, because a lot of these analytics are around your audience. It gives you kind of some of the fundamentals, charts and data, like the numbers of downloads. That's the most important thing, downloads per episode. But it also gives you some more interesting stuff, like completion rate. So actually whether your listener have finished listening to your podcast and which part of the episode they stop at, where they come from. And I think here we have a quick example of screenshots of our host analytics. So you can see here, interestingly, a lot of our, it's by design, right? A lot of our listeners are from Vietnam. but we also have some mass in Australia and UK. Not surprising because I think a lot of our circles and friends are based there. But again, so when you think about choosing your podcast hosts, and there are many, I'm saying many, and there's around 50, more than 50 of them. They basically offer a mix of a lot of these function and features. So between a website, a feed, some analytics mix in there. They have different pricing range. It's pretty confusing. But we're not going to go into too much detail here. You can look at many comparison websites. But basically, in our case, after some thorough research, we decided to go with Simplecast. If many of you have been to our website, you know that that's the name of our host. It's around $15 per month, and it has all the feature we need. It's like a good design, ease of use for us to upload the episode, change our notes if we want to, and some decent analytics, right? So again, some are free, like Anchor, if people have heard about it. But for us, it's just not good enough, and it doesn't give us enough control. But yeah, that's rough, really. I think we can move on into after you launch a podcast, what do you do? I think Viang, you might want to share a bit here.
Yeah, next, can you go to the next one?
Yep.
All right. So after you launch your first episode, it's really important to ask for feedback, because that way you can, what people are thinking about the content that you produce, and also, have more insights into their, preference in terms of content. And also you want to see if there's any area that you could do even better. Or sometimes just like simply keep our audience informed that, hey, our podcast is out. Can you give it a try? Mm-hmm. So feedback is also a very great channel to introduce your podcast to potential audience. We also use feedback to maybe validate a few things that we already suspect. So for example, our fifth episode featuring Chị Cẩm Vân, I still remember it was like a 4 hour long conversation with almost no break. It was great, and it was exhausting. It was such a great talk that we didn't really want to edit out anything. We want, all our beloved women to hear it and get inspired. Some friends told us like putting out an hour length podcast is too risky. You never want to push your audience away the moment they see the length of an episode. But again, we never know what other people think if we don't try and ask, right? So we still published the 2 episodes with very little edit, and the response that we got was surprising and amazing. People loved it and don't mind, the 2 hours long, and it all confirms our belief. We believe that stories should be treated like cannot be treated equally, right? Some stories should be short, some others shouldn't be. As long as it's a good story and you know how to tell that story the right way, people will listen. And from our 3rd episode until now, we noticed that the feedback that we got now, 100% comes from outside our circles. We often get emails, thank you notes, and messages from a lot of friends we haven't met each other before, but they still give like massive support for our show. If any of you is attending this webinar now, I just want to take this opportunity to thank you. Your words just mean a lot to us. Juggling a full-time job and a passion project like this it's really not easy, but rewarding. It's really rewarding, right? Because we kind of like just we were, oh my god, I don't know, I'm just lost of words, because you guys did amazing. You just but before we could meet and maybe say thank you more properly in person, we promise that we will produce more quality content in the future. Okay, yeah. Thank you.
Maybe none of our listeners actually on here, so hopefully they will be.
No, I know some of them are.
Okay, nice.
Yeah,
cool. I think as Viang pointed out, I mean, feedback is amazing. I think we've pretty much mentioned every time we post anything or we share any of our episode. And I think the other great way is sometimes we are able to share our feedback with the wider audience, right, Viang? we got some screenshots and we would share it anonymously. Just a
Yeah.
ways to get others to be interested in our podcast. I think
Mm.
here it's more around okay, so once you've launched a podcast, you got some good feedback from people, you got some of your hypothesis validated or whatever. Here's some more concrete way you can think about how to grow your podcast audience strategically. So I think the first thing is, we started with kind of direct messaging a lot of our friends and family, right? I mean, many of you got spam from us in terms of listen to this episode, listen to that episode, give us feedback, whatever. But when we've exhausted that options, we move on to finding kind of more wider forums and communities, or some that are relevant to us, like the student communities, the overseas student communities, like SVUK in the UK, or recently the overseas Vietnamese group run by the team there, which is awesome. But again, it's all about finding relevant forums and communities that you can share your work where relevant. Social media is also key. We do try to post something at least once or twice a week, at least relevant to our podcast, and maybe show a little bit of our personality, right? So, and again, I think it's crucial to have some nice design platform to back you up with that. Or I mean, as simple as sharing text, but I think we often find that having some sort of visual that come with your posts is more engaging and more interesting to the audience. I think the third one there is around collaboration and partnerships, and it could be understood in multiple angles. The first one is actually a recent episode that we did. So we collaborate with a good friend podcast of ours called Tadi Tay, which is focusing on studying abroad. So that's, and I think that was massively successful. We got a lot more listeners coming in from there, audience base, and then vice versa, right? So some of our listeners subscribe to Tadi Tay, and it's just fun. I mean, it's always fun because I think, as we pointed out at the beginning, there's still a very small creator community in Vietnam in general. So we kind of all know each other. So yeah, it's just fun to talk about our work and know people a little bit more, and it kind of give us a platform to do more talking as well, because we tend to be a listener in our own podcast, because we do interviews, right? So we ask questions and we listen to our guests. So the fourth thing there is around press, which is interesting, something that we've looked into but haven't executed yet. But it's obviously one of the ways you reach a critical mass, where you can get features on VTV or VTV or whatever, or Kênh 14, or whatever for press site you can get. But having exposure there would obviously massively grow your audience, if that's something you can do. The fifth thing there is around finding and adding kind of value, differentiated content to whatever you're doing. So it could be YouTube videos. We've thought about it, but it's at the moment it's something that we're considering. But for example, the most straightforward one for you to expand into is actually a newsletter and blog posts. So obviously a lot of your followers would love your content, but if you can give them some more kind of ad hoc insights and recommendations throughout the week, that's useful as well, right? But we leave the last thing towards the end in terms of growing the audience. But it's a bit of a paradox, because it's about growing your audience, because we actually, our ethos with creating our podcasts and with our listeners as well is quality is much better than quantity. And what we mean by this is that we believe in this concept called 1,000 true fans, from a guy called Kevin Kelly. He's a well-known editor and writer of The Wire. But basically, this, in summary, what he's saying is, to be a successful creator, right, you don't need millions of fans or listeners or viewers. You just need 1,000 true fans. And what do you mean by true fans? These are folks who will buy anything that you produce. These are folks that will, drive 200 miles just to see you sing, to buy that kind of hardback book cover for you. They will, pay, come to your chef table if you're a chef once every month. But the point is, you have to have a direct relationship to these fans in a way that they should be able to contribute to your progress or pay you directly if possible. So, for example, if you think about if we have 1,000 true fans, and then we start a subscription service of around $100 per fan per year, that's essentially $100,000 per year between the two of us. I think that's hopefully enough to cover all of our costs, and maybe we can think about doing this full time, for example. But this might sound a bit too capitalist for folks, a bit too businessy. I mean, we actually don't look at it that way in terms of money, But I think this is going back to our point at the beginning, which is we want to create meaningful relationships with our listener. We want to be able to hear them, to proactively reach out to them to ask for feedback. I think as Viang pointed out, we are proud of every message and thank you note and feedback that our listeners have shared with us. And actually, we've talked to many of them more recently. Starting to build up some good friendships over there. And it pretty much fulfill our original objective of creating Unlock FM around creating meaningful conversation for people. And I think we also think of this as a feedback loop for us, because the more feedback we get, the more fans we get, we just produce better content, and then it just become this positive feedback loop, right? Okay, so I think, again, in the interest of time, I'll brush through the last bit really quickly, because disclaimer, we have not monetized our podcast yet, but it is something that we're consciously thinking about. And these things that are on here are pretty straightforward. So around advertising, sponsorships, membership platform, Patreon, folks have known. But I guess the one thing that we want to maybe highlight, and the most straightforward one actually, is advertising, because advertising in podcasting is actually is very tricky. It's not because it's very hard to measure the impact. There's no uniform analytics or measurements like Google ads or Facebook ads. You don't really know your click-through rate or whatever, right? So most often only niche brand go for podcast advertising, and usually in terms of brand advertising, if people are in marketing. But we're actually excited about this in a way that because I think Viang and I, we both love trying out stuff and recommending stuff to people in our own personal life. And I think we found that many of them tend to find our recommendation useful. So we kind of see this as a win-win-win for the business who believe in us, for our listeners, and for ourselves, right? Basically, it means that we can bring meaningful products and service to our listeners that we ourselves believe in and love, and obviously get some money out of it. But that's the point. I think I won't touch on the other point. It's pretty straightforward if people start looking into it. But again, I think, to our disclaimer, monetizing in podcasting is not as straightforward as people think it would be. But yeah, it's something that we're happy to kind of take this conversation forward. Reach out to us if you're interested in this, again, and leave questions and that we can pick up. So I think this is towards the end of our webinar. And I think we would just like to finish on this quote from Elizabeth Gilbert, if you know her from Eat, Pray, Love. But in essence, I'm just going to speak it out, but creativity is a crushing chore and is a glorious mystery, right? The work wants to be made, and it wants to be made through you. What it means to us is, and going back to our original quote at the beginning, we truly believe that all individuals have a story to tell, or in essence, a creative energy to release. It won't be easy, but it will be massively rewarding once you get your hands dirty and you know that your work can help people in some sort of way. I mean, we found it super rewarding. We've learned and earned a lot throughout this journey. We're super excited for more to come from ourselves and from our listeners. And we hope that our quick webinar today, again, it's super it may be a bit tedious. There are many steps involved, but we hope that at least you have something here. You are excited to embark on your own journey in creating podcasts, and maybe at some point we can collaborate in the futures. Yeah. I don't know if you have any thoughts, or we can. Cool. Okay.
You did great work. Cool.
So let's see. I think the next section we have is getting some feedback in real time, but maybe again in conscious of time, maybe we skip that. I don't know. Anne, what do you think? Not putting you on the spot, but I mean, do folks want to stick around for a bit more? I don't know.
What I would suggest is let's skip this.
Cool.
But
okay.
It doesn't mean that we'll skip this completely. So what I'll suggest now for everyone who's present is that we're going to move straight to the Q&A section. What will happen is we will answer the first top 4 questions and then move to our thank you slide from us. However, it doesn't mean that the questions that you've asked will not be answered. So what I suggest is that after the top 4 questions, I'll conclude But for those that want to stay on, because I know that we said this is going to finish in 5 minutes time. For those that want to stay on and listen to your questions being answered, feel free to stay on.
And do the quiz. We can do the quiz at the end.
And we can do the quiz.
Yeah.
So the Jamboard can be part of that as well, right? So,
yeah.
So okay, first of all, thank you very much, Viang and Quyen. I'm going to move straight to the top 4 questions. So what we have here is what I'm going to do is I'm going to, for those that have put their names down in the question, I'm going to allow you to talk directly. So I can see here that Mike Taylor, you've got your name, and Ha Nguyen, you've got your name there. So I will start with Mike Taylor. So I'm about to allow you to talk. Let me just find you here. Okay. Mike, then I think you still need to unmute yourself, Mike, and then go ahead with asking your question to Quyen and Viang. So you should be able to talk now, Mike, if you unmute yourself.
Hello.
Hey, Mike.
Hi.
Oh, hey, it's working. Cool. Thanks for the great lesson. First of all, this content's been amazing. I got loads of notes out of it.
Oh, great.
My question was, what was it? How do you guys find time to record, produce, deliver podcasts while having a 9 to 5?
That's an interesting question.
tips?
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, I think we always find time. We always have time for something that we are passionate about. For us, to be honest, like the first few weeks when we first started, it was overwhelming because, oh my God, like I have to, learn something new and spend just, a lot of times on the first episode, even when it was just like half an hour, right? No, even 20 minutes. It was really overwhelming at first, but then the more you do it, the more you kind of like get used to it. And then I guess like we try to time box our task a little bit. Like we will just leave all the podcasting and everything podcast like to the weekend, and try, not to like, what I mean is like have a plan and time box all the tasks. It's gonna help you keep control of everything that you do. Yeah, I guess that's how it works.
Yeah, and I guess I mean we don't particularly do timesheets when we're creating this podcast, right? But I guess it's around going back to the point around being passionate about it. I think we love doing it. It's overwhelming at first. I think, as we said, it gets better, as we do more and more. But yeah, I think it's all about your passion, right? If you feel like you want to do it, I think it's all doable. If we can do it, you can do it. And we don't, obviously, this is not we're not producing as frequent content as a full-time podcaster would do. I think we tend to try to stick to maybe a 2 or 3 episode per month. That's kind of within our workload. We might think about expanding our team just to see if we can do more. But yeah, again, you can do it. Everyone can do it, I think.
One thing I forgot to ask, Mike, could you quickly introduce yourself, what you do and where you're connecting from, if that's all right?
Oh, yeah, sure. So yeah, my name's Mike. I live in London, and I work for Google as well, actually. And I found out about this through my other half, Feng Kai, who's sat next to me.
Oh, right. Oh, hey, Mike.
Cool.
That's awesome.
Thank you, Mike. I'm going to move to the second question. It's by an anonymous attendee. The question for Viang and Quyen is, any plan, idea on how to monetize podcasting?
I think we briefly cover it towards the end. I mean, there's a lot of things we can do in terms of monetizations, but I think maybe what we do is the first thing that we might consider is advertising at some point. But again, only for a brand that we believe in and brand that we actually love ourselves.
Okay, thank you. Next question, again by an anonymous attendee. So that is, how much time does it typically take you to produce one episode?
Again, I think we to my questions, we don't typically time box it, but I would say maybe just to give folks some some reference. I think a typical recording session is around 3 or 4 hours. We always said, oh, let's stick with 2 hours, and it just become more and more and more and much longer. And then we spend maybe another 3 or 4 hours between the two of us to edit that episode. And then we do some design around it, which maybe takes around 1 or 2 hours. In total, I would say maybe each episode, and don't quote episode, each guest for us takes around 10 hours, roughly, for each of us.
Is that from beginning all the way to the end?
Yeah, from recording, creating script or whatever. It could be more. But again, we don't time box it. We tend to do it in the evening. Actually, maybe a good point here is because of COVID-19, and the one good thing that kind of come out of it is we have more freedom while working at home. So I tend to just mix up my Google, and Mike, don't tell Google, between what I do at Google and then this podcast.
Okay, great. So the last question before I conclude is by Anh Quyen. So I'm going to enable you to ask that question directly to our panelists. So you need to unmute yourself to ask that question.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, could you please introduce yourself, what you do and where you connecting from? Thank you.
Yeah, cool. So my name is Ha, connecting from Saigon, and I'm currently hello anh chị, hello everyone. So I'm currently a lecturer at University of Pharmacy and Medicine. So I'm teaching there. Đại học Y Dược Thành phố Hồ Chí Minh City.
Wow,
Thank you, chị.
that's so cool.
Is it? Okay. So I'm a regular listener from the Unlock SM postcard, and I think you guys really awesome. So just a quick question for chị and Anh Quyen. So starting a postcard is like a new habit, and forming a habit for myself really hard. So do you guys have any like psychological trick or productivity to keep yourself motivated to put out content on a consistently basis?
Interesting questions. So I think we already touched on the passion bit before with Mike, but at the same time, you should probably think about the topic when you're trying to develop your idea. Also, like take into account your expertise as well, because if you try to do something that you don't really know how to deliver it, like if you for example, if I do a podcast about like medicine, and I kind of like, because I think it's cool, and I kind of like have to push myself to, oh my god, and have to know about everything about medicines, it's gonna just you will soon burn out, because you don't know what to talk about, and you have to try to be someone else. So I guess it's in terms of habit, I think, as I say, even though we can't time box everything, but for me personally, I always have a plan for podcasts, like time box my day, especially it's going to be Saturday every week. I'm going to spend the whole day just to do podcast, and then when I'm done, I'm not going to touch on it. I'm going to hand it over to Quyen.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
So like
having sorry, Ha, go on. Yeah.
No, just try to summarize what chị what chị just said is like having like a fixed time in your schedule to sit down and just do it. And the second point, just stick to your stick to what you know, and don't try to overwhelm yourself at the beginning.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, and maybe I'll add 2 points to it, which is I mentioned at the beginning, but for me, having a sunk cost is a good thing. So the fact that I actually invested this amount of money into buying the microphones and everything, that kind of forced me to realize the value out of it. It sounds stupid, but it works for me. So I don't know if it works for other people. But then I'll say the other tips is around pushing your content out early. So don't sit on it too long. I think, as you pointed out, it is a habit. But I think if you kind of think and ponder upon your podcast for too long, and you don't get that kind of positive feedback cycle as we talk about, so getting it out to your listener, getting some feedback, then it's tough, right? So I would say don't think too much about it. Produce 2-3 episodes and get it out there. It'd be rewarding. Hope that answered.
Yeah, it does, Anh. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, anh chị. Yes.
Yep,
Thank
and maybe
you.
Anne, we can wrap up and you can
Yeah,
share.
thank you, Ha. Okay, guys, so the remaining questions that are here, they will be answered. They will be answered. We are conscious of time, so I'm going to do a wrap up. However, after the wrap up, if those of you who have time and you can stay, then please stay, because we will be answering the remaining questions, and I hope Anh Quyen, that's all right with you. So let me share my screen now. So can everyone see?
Yep.
Slides? Okay.
Yep.
First of all, thank you very much, Anh Quyen and chị Vi Anh. It's been, I think, very insightful. You mentioned it's tedious, but I think for anyone who watches this webinar, they should have the toolkit to start off. And for everyone, this webinar will be recorded and we will post it online. So first of all, I hope everyone can join me in thank you, Vi Anh and Anh Quyen, for giving out their time and offering insights. I'll just clap, but just know that I'm clapping for everyone. And then in terms of, you can see here, we have our link where you can donate. So if you like the session, please make sure to donate. We're doing it for a good cause. And the money that you donate, it will go directly into helping the children and the families that are vulnerable in this time. You can click on the link, or you can use your camera on your smartphone and just scan the QR code that will open the website for you to donate. And in terms of what's next, if you like our webinar, please make sure to donate and follow our SchoolQuest VietPro COVID-19 fundraiser Facebook page for updates. We will be sharing the next webinar this Tuesday. And well, please make sure to share the SchoolQuest events with your friends. And yeah, thank you for joining us. So for those that still want to stay, and there are still remaining questions here, and we will go through them now. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and then we'll go back to the questions. So the next question that I have here is from Zio Nguyen. So what I'll do now is, if you hang on a minute, I'm going to enable Zio to ask that question directly. Oh, Zio Nguyen seems not to be here anymore. Anyway, so the question is, what is your ultimate vision for your podcast series, Unlock FM?
No spoiler alert. We can't say it. No, I need to be honest. I think we have visions. I think obviously we want to kind of keep sharing the lessons that we got from our guests to people. Ultimately, is to support people in the career path, right? That's our ultimate goal. Hopefully, every episode that we produce will get something to people. I mean, if Zia was speaking about business vision, is something else, and it's probably not suitable for this podcast. Happy to talk to folks who are interested, but yeah, I think ultimately our objective is to support, inspire people, no matter where they are, no matter what their background is, to find, and unlock their path. That's as our slogan would say. But I would say, and maybe a quick one here. If people are still on the line, should we maybe jump in and do the quick quiz?
Yeah, do your Jamboard. Yeah.
Or Jamboard.
Sure.
Maybe Jamboard later. I would say because the team is going to send out the feedback form anyway, right? So yeah.
So
maybe
let's do the questions
do
then.
the quiz. Okay. So we got Nicole saying let's do the quiz. So let's do it.
So next one is anonymous attendee. Do you have any advice on how to ensure sound quality when interviewing guests online or without studio? So that has been answered. So
okay.
do you want to? So
no,
because
the
question has been answered, what I'll say is that you will be able to find it in the recording. So let's move on to the next question. Again, by anonymous attendee, how do you get your recordings onto Spotify?
I think we spoke about it. If you go to any of the podcasts, they will instruct you how to do it.
Again, we have Mike's question. I'm not sure if Mike is still on here. So Mike, I'm going to enable you again. You don't need to introduce yourself. I think everyone's heard that. So Mike, you can ask the question.
Hey again. My other question was, do you have any specific techniques for gathering feedback? I don't think you dived into that when you mentioned feedback. You mentioned email.
Yeah. I guess typically we would have that call to actions on all of our episodes and all of our social media posts. But what we tend to do as well is we try to get as much feedback as we can from our close circle, people that we can force to give our feedback. So for all of our close friends or whoever. But then also when people reach out to us, say via emails, or I mean, if they proactively reach out to us and we haven't contacted them before, then we would follow up that by we would answer whatever they say, but then the next thing we're going to ask is, can you give us some feedback or at least a review somewhere that's meaningful for people? There's no, I mean, we can't think of any other specific way to do it, right, VA? But that's pretty much what we do. It's pretty organic, to be fair. It's just something that's top of mind for us every time someone talks to us. Hope that helps.
Okay, thanks. 2 last questions. From your experience, what's the best time frequency to release podcasts?
Oh, wow. I don't know. Like for us, I think the best time is the time that works for us, maybe. So we finish all the editing and everything on Saturday, and we release the new episode on Sunday to wrap up the week.
I think there's some sign behind this, but we don't really care. Yeah.
Okay. And then last question before we jump into the feedback Jamboards. Last question is from Zip Nguyen.
Oh.
So Zip, you are online. I'm going to enable you to ask a question. Please again introduce yourself. Where are you joining us from and what do you do?
Hopefully Zip's not on her bed anymore.
So Zip, there you go. You need to unmute yourself, Zip.
I'm not seen, right? Because I'm in my PJ.
You're not on screen. Don't worry.
Hi, Quyen, and hello, Viang, and hello, everyone. Yeah, I'm actually making coffee now. But like I really like your music in your podcast, and I'm just really curious how you find really good quality and uplifting music. I think it plays a very important part in engaging with your audience.
Oh, interesting. Thank you so much for your question, and also thank you for liking our music. Yeah, we are so surprised that we got a lot of feedback saying, oh, I love your music is cool. But actually all the music that we use, they are all free. We are very careful when we select our music because we are very conscious of the copyright and everything. I actually just randomly like scroll through SoundCloud, and then there's another website I can actually send out later. I don't even remember the name, but it's like a free source that you can just browse through and just listen, and because it's free, so it's not you kind of like have to spend some time to listen to like a list like full of songs, and it's lengthy. Yeah,
I think basically it's just music that we personally enjoy, right? So
yeah.
And what we would do actually is on our backlog. We're gonna add all of the music credit to our episode notes.
Yeah.
We're gonna backtrack some of our stuff. So yeah, if you're interested, you can look it up there. And usually, the magic algorithm of SoundCloud and YouTube can take you away, really. Hope that helps.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you, guys. This has been super helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cool. We have one more question, but let's jump into. I'm not sure what it was, Jamboard or quiz, but
let's do quiz.
Take it away. And
okay.
Okay, go ahead.
See if folks can see it. Can people see it?
Yeah.
Cool. Give me a second as well. So yeah, if folks can turn to kahoot.it and then find that game pin. Please do it.
Can I play some music in the background?
I think it should have some music. Maybe let's see. Can you hear it?
No. It's the Kahoot funny music. Oh, I need to join.
I think when you join, you can hear the music.
How did it?
Battery 60%. Connected to N's iPhone.
Yep, still waiting for a few more folks.
So we've still got 28 people online.
Sorry, Quyen. How do I get to the link?
It's kahoot.it here.
Okay. Sorry.
You want to play, Yang? It might be a bit unfair to people.
Yeah.
I mean, you haven't seen the answer, but it's
You will
okay.
win it. That's gonna be unfair.
I just want to have a look. Yeah.
Okay, how many people we still have online? Don't know.
27.
Okay.
What I'll say is I'll give it another half minute and then let's start it.
Cool. Whoop, sorry. Did I do something? I think I just kicked someone out. Sorry. They can rejoin. 19. Give it till 20 and then we can start, I think. Okay.
All right, so
let's do it. Okay. Oh, okay. People still joining.
So maybe 10 seconds, everyone.
Okay. 10, 9, 8, 3, 2, 1. Let's do it. Are you ready? Oh,
yes.
Oh, tough one.
I guess this one.
Okay, let's go next. So yeah, I think all of the questions today, we've kind of talked through it in our podcast. Sometimes it's a stat, sometimes it's something we briefly mentioned. So just to test if you actually been listening. It's pretty tough. Nice, Mike is up there. Anne, okay.
I was guessing.
Cool, let's do it. What is the most popular reason for people to listen to a podcast? And you only have 10 seconds. Quickly. Nice. What? No one to find love? That's a shame. But I think this is also based on a survey. Most people, I think the top 3 reason for people to listen to a podcast is to learn something new. A second for fun and entertainment, and then fourth is or whatever. I put the answer there. I can't remember. Okay, let's go next. Again, it's only I forgot to mention it's only 10 seconds. So you have to do it quite quickly.
And the faster you do it, the more points you get.
Yep. Oh, nice.
Ooh.
Okay. Let's go next. Anne's on the scoreboard. Cool. What type of microphone is versatile? It can reduce background noise. Nice. Oh, people have been listening. Cool. It is dynamic. It's the one I'm using at the moment. Cool. So who on the scoreboard now? Oh wow, is this Hyo at the beginning? And Kwang is right up there as well. Nice. Let's go next. Last 4 questions. Which one of the below is a free digital audio workstations? Free. Ooh, nice. Oh, it's getting competitive. Wow. Let's see the scoreboard. Oh, damn. David's getting up there. Mike is getting up there. Nice. Okay, let's go next.
I need to make a comeback.
Which below is not a podcast app?
Oh.
Oh, yeah, it's a tricky one because for folks who don't know, it's called Apple Podcasts. It's actually not iPodcasts.
Yeah, I got it right.
And Wave is a Vietnamese podcast app. It's a tough one maybe because I haven't mentioned it. So, Mike is on fire.
Whoa.
Wow. Okay.
Whoa.
Good stuff. Let's go next. What is the most important component of a podcast host?
Good looking.
Nice. Yeah, it is as a feed. It's basically the way for people to consume your podcast and for the apps to download from. Last question, actually. See who's on the scoreboard.
Wow.
Oh, Mike and Dan is up there. Nice. Okay. It's quite close, actually. I think a lot of this is depending on whether you have a streak of right answer. So, okay, final one. Which below is not a design platform? Nice. Okay, it's another trick questions because it's 99 design. It's not 96 design. And obviously the other threes are design platform. Okay, the moment of truth, I think. Let's see who's the winner. Ooh, ooh. Oh, Dan's third place.
Wow.
Third. Mike.
Oh, wow, Mike's second place. Oh, nice. Wow.
Wow.
Stuff.
And runners up HN and
Nice.
Nicole.
Okay.
One last thing is there's one last question. If you can answer. So do you guys set any criteria target for yourself to assess the quality and result of each podcast? For example, number of listeners.
I guess we do, but we don't do it kind of scientifically, right? Yeah. We track how many downloads and whatever, but yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Once again, thank you everyone for joining us. Anh Quyen, you seem you want to say some final last words before we.
I was going to say, so this is, let's see if I can do it really quickly. But yeah, I think I mentioned at the beginning, there is a prize for winning the quiz. And I'm see if I can actually show it. Yeah, if people can see it. So yeah, it's a $20 gift from a podcast host, which is called Acast. It's not the one that we use, but it's the next best thing. So well, it's the one that actually have a gift option. So well, Guang, let's ping us your email, and we send through the gift for you. Hopefully, this can kickstart your podcasting journey. And actually, there's a bonus gift for everyone who's been staying on today, or I guess actually everyone who's put in their email. We have put together a quick guide which summarizes a lot of our content here today. So if you've been taking notes, throw them away. You don't need them because we actually got one. So yeah, we're going to send that out to anyone who's been listening. Yeah, that's it really. And back to you, Anne. Thank you for listening again.
Well, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. Stay tuned. We will be releasing the next webinar this Tuesday on our Facebook page. Okay, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Viang. Thank you, Quyen. And
Thank you.
have a nice day.
Yeah,
Bye.
thank you. Please consider donating. Bye.
Bye-bye.